They say you never truly know someone until you watch them celebrate your death. I stand in the shadows of my own study, watching my wife of 12 years raise a champagne toast with my CFO to my tragic yachting accident. After building a tech security empire worth $3 billion from nothing, I finally discovered the one vulnerability I couldn't patch: trust. On the monitors around them, evidence of their 2-year conspiracy plays in high definition. My medication being tampered with, offshore accounts being established, company protocols being altered. The irony isn't lost on me. The man who built an empire protecting others' digital secrets couldn't protect himself from the most intimate betrayal. Elena doesn't know that surviving in open water was only the first phase of my contingency protocol. I step from the shadows, savoring the moment their celebration turns to ash. I've always believed people deserve a chance to explain themselves before facing consequences. Consider this yours. The champagne flowed freely at my 70th birthday celebration. Elena had transformed our lakeside estate into a showcase of tasteful elegance, just enough to impress without appearing ostentatious. That was her specialty, creating perfect appearances. To Richard, Elena raised her glass, her voice carrying across our gathered friends and colleagues. At 55, she remained striking, her carefully maintained beauty a stark contrast to my weathered appearance. The candlelight softened the lines around her eyes, those same eyes that had captivated me 12 years ago when she sold me a beachfront property in San Diego. Who built Secure Tech into the protection giant it is today? Your legacy is assured, darling. I noticed the slight emphasis on legacy, as though my contributions belonged to the past. I smiled and accepted the toast, but something in her eyes didn't match her words. Something calculating. I wouldn't be here without all of you, I responded, gesturing to the team members who had been with me since the beginning. Some, like Margaret, my executive assistant, had weathered 3 decades of challenges alongside me. Secure Tech was never about me. It was about creating systems people could trust. Michael Reynolds, my CFO of 15 years, stepped forward. At 43, he embodied the next generation of leadership I'd carefully cultivated. I'd personally mentored him since recruiting him from Stanford's business program. And now those systems protect half the Fortune 500, Michael said, with practiced precision, though markets are changing rapidly, requiring new approaches. He glanced at Elena, an exchange so brief most would miss it. I didn't. The party continued into the evening, a carefully orchestrated celebration of a life's work. Photos from Secure Tech's evolution lined the walls, from my military days in cybersecurity to the company's current headquarters in Silicon Valley. The images told a story of methodical growth and ethical business practices that had become increasingly rare in the tech world. Later, as guests mingled on the terrace overlooking Lake Tahoe, I retreated to my office to review quarterly reports on my tablet. The numbers seemed off, security protocol upgrades I'd never authorized, resource allocations shifted from our mentorship foundation to marketing. When I mentioned this to Michael, his explanation came too quickly, too smoothly. Just market adaptations, Richard. We discussed this last month. His tone carried the faintest hint of condescension. Don't you remember the meeting with the Singapore team? You approved the reallocation then. I did not. And I remembered everything about my company. When I reached for my glass, it slipped from my hand, shattering on the marble floor. A small lapse in coordination, nothing unusual for a man my age. But Elena was immediately at my side, her concern theatrical. Richard's been working too hard, she announced to nearby guests, her hand protectively on my shoulder. At 70, even the strongest of us need to consider stepping back. The way several board members nodded made me wonder how often she'd had this conversation without me. Bernard Wilson, my oldest friend on the board, frowned slightly, the only one who seemed uncomfortable with Elena's presumption. Later that night, I sat in my office reviewing the reports again. The inconsistencies remained. Elena entered, wrapped in silk, concern etched on her perfect features. "Darling, it's after midnight. These reports will wait until morning." She moved behind me, her hands gently massaging my shoulders. "Something doesn't add up with the foundation allocations," I said, not looking up. "The mentorship program funding has been cut by 30%. I never approved that." She sighed softly, her breath warm against my ear. "You've been forgetting things, Richard, small things, but it's happening more frequently." Her voice lowered. "The allocation changes were approved in the May budget meeting. You signed off on them yourself." I pulled up the May meeting minutes. My digital signature was there, but I had no recollection of this decision. The foundation was my passion, providing opportunities for brilliant young minds from disadvantaged backgrounds. Why would I cut its funding? "I'm not suffering from dementia, Elena," I said firmly. "Of course not." She kissed the top of my head. "But perhaps it's time to consider full retirement. Let Michael handle the day-to-day operations. You've earned a rest." "I'm not ready," I replied simply. "Just think about it, for me." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Don't forget your medication. The doctor increased your dosage last week." After she left, I noticed my prescription bottle on the desk. The label showed 10 milligillers, but I distinctly remembered Dr. Harrison prescribing 5 milligillers 3 months ago. My phone buzzed. Margaret, my executive assistant of 25 years. "Mr. Harrington, sorry to call so late, but there's been unusual access to the Berlin contracts, someone using your credentials at 2 a.m. last Tuesday." I was asleep at 2 a.m. last Tuesday, with Elena beside me, or so I thought. "Thank you, Margaret. Let's keep this between us for now. And Margaret, pull the visitor logs for all board members over the past 6 months. Don't file it officially." "Already done, sir." Elena has been meeting privately with 4 newer board members, and Mr. Reynolds has been accessing the succession protocols repeatedly. Margaret's efficiency had always been her hallmark, her loyalty, her greatest value. The next morning, I visited Dr. Harrison without telling Elena. My physician of 20 years looked concerned when I described my symptoms and the medication changes. "Richard, I never authorized this dosage increase, and these particular side effects, confusion, coordination issues, they're consistent with over-medication. Could I be mistaken about the prescription? Possible, but unlikely given your usual attention to detail." He studied me carefully. "I'd like to run some cognitive tests today, establish a baseline, and I'd recommend not taking these pills until we sort this out." The tests confirmed what I already knew. My cognitive function was normal for my age, nothing that would explain missing meetings or forgetting major policy changes. As I left his office, I called James Connor, my former head of security, now retired. Like me, he'd come from military intelligence before entering the private sector. At 65, he remained sharp as ever. "James, I need a security audit." "Off the books." "Corporate espionage?" he asked, immediately understanding the need for discretion. "That's what we'll call it for now," I replied, unwilling to voice my growing suspicions about my wife. "Your secure line still active at the lake house?" "Yes." "Contact me there tomorrow." Standard protocols. When I returned home, Elena was waiting, excitement evident. "Richard, I've planned something special for our anniversary next month, A Mediterranean cruise, just the two of us. You've been working too hard. We need this. I studied my wife's beautiful face, searching for any sign of deception. 12 years of marriage, and suddenly I felt as though I was looking at a stranger. That sounds perfect, I lied, matching her smile with one of my own. I could use some time away. She embraced me, her perfume enveloping me like a familiar cloud. I've already arranged everything. The Artemis is being prepared as we speak. The Artemis, my 120-foot yacht, rarely used but maintained for occasional corporate events. Isolated, private, and far from help if needed. Something was very wrong in my carefully constructed world, and I needed to know how deep the deception went before confronting it. James had transformed his ranch house into a command center. Multiple screens displayed secure tech system access logs, document modifications, and communication records. His military precision remained undiminished at 65. The system access patterns are consistent, Richard. Someone's been entering the system using your credentials during your regular sleep hours, between 1 and 4 a.m. for the past 7 months. He pointed to a timeline display showing access points. Initially, it was just information gathering, financial reports, board minutes, succession protocols. Then in February, active changes began, small at first, then increasingly significant. Could it be remote hacking? I asked, knowing the answer already. Not with our biometric requirements. Someone physically used your security token and password from your home network. His expression was grim. The pattern suggests someone who knows your routine intimately. Margaret placed a folder on the table. These are the original meeting minutes compared with the versions in the system now. Note the changes to succession protocol language and foundation governance. I examined the documents, my suspicion crystallizing into certainty. The original succession protocol required board approval for any leadership change. The modified version included a provision for temporary leadership assignment during health emergencies, with only medical documentation required. The succession protocol never included temporary leadership assignment during health emergencies. That's new. There's more, James said, pulling up financial records. Offshore accounts established in both your names, but the access protocols only include Elena's biometrics. Initial funding came from the reallocation of foundation resources, cleverly disguised as strategic marketing initiatives. The evidence was damning but still circumstantial. I needed more before acting. The cruise creates both risk and opportunity, I noted. If they're planning something significant, being isolated at sea puts me in danger. Or gives you the chance to catch them in the act, James countered. We can prepare for both scenarios. Margaret nodded. I've accessed Elena's calendar. She's been meeting regularly with Dr. Lansing, not your regular physician. He specializes in cognitive decline certification for legal purposes. Perfect for declaring me incompetent, I concluded. They're building a paper trail. 2 days later, I attended a special board meeting. Elena arrived separately, dressed in a conservative blue suit that projected both authority and appropriate wifely concern. The boardroom, with its panoramic views of Silicon Valley, had witnessed countless strategic decisions over the years. Today, it would host an attempted coup. As several of you have noted, she began, Richard has been experiencing some cognitive challenges. Nothing serious, she quickly added, reaching for my hand with practiced affection. But it raises important questions about contingency leadership. Michael stepped forward with a presentation. The slides detailed a temporary transition protocol that could be activated with medical certification of incapacity. We've developed protocols for temporary leadership transition during any potential health episodes. The emphasis on temporary felt hollow. This ensures continuity and stability for our clients and shareholders. Bernard Wilson, my oldest friend on the board, frowned. This seems rushed. Has Richard been medically evaluated? And why wasn't this discussed in the governance committee first? Richard's dignity is paramount, Elena replied smoothly. We wanted to minimize speculation and gossip. As for medical evaluation, Dr. Lansing has been consulting with us on cognitive health markers. I noted she didn't mention that Dr. Lansing had never actually examined me. Actually, I interjected, deliberately slurring my words slightly, I've been having some memory issues. Small things. Elena squeezed my hand, the perfect picture of supportive concern. But her eyes betrayed satisfaction. I watched carefully as the vote proceeded. The board split predictably, long-term members expressing reservation, newer appointments supporting the measure. I strategically abstained, observing who aligned where. Afterward, Bernard pulled me aside. Richard, Elena's been having private meetings with half the board for months. Something doesn't feel right. I appreciate your concern, Bernard. Keep this between us for now. You know I've got your back. Always have since MIT. Bernard and I had been friends for nearly 50 years, since our engineering days. His loyalty wasn't in question. That evening, I met James, Margaret, and a surprise addition, my brother Thomas. Our public estrangement was carefully cultivated misdirection. In reality, Thomas remained my most trusted confidant. At 72, his intelligence career had given him an instinct for conspiracy that surpassed even mine. Elena Harrington isn't her first identity, Thomas revealed, spreading photographs across the table. She was Elena Vasquez in Chicago, then Elena Keller in Boston. Both marriages to wealthy men significantly older than herself, both ending under questionable circumstances. He laid out a timeline. Vasquez's husband died in a hiking accident in 2003. Keller suffered a stroke after what was ruled medication confusion in 2009. Both left their entire estates to her. And Michael? I asked. Margaret slid forward another folder. Their relationship predates your marriage. They met at Stanford when he was completing his MBA. They've maintained contact throughout, though they're careful. The communication is routed through 3 separate proxy servers. He's been systematically isolating you from key clients and board members, Thomas added. The pattern is subtle but consistent, suggesting scheduling conflicts when you try to meet long-term allies, routing communications through assistants who filter information. They're creating a reality where you appear increasingly incompetent, Thomas concluded. The question is how far they're willing to go. I considered the Mediterranean cruise Elena had planned. James, I need surveillance equipment installed on the yacht. And a fail-safe communication system. Already arranged, he replied. We've placed cameras in the main living areas and your private quarters. The monitoring devices are undetectable with standard sweeps, and we've installed a military-grade GPS tracker in your watch, waterproof to 200 meters. And Richard, be careful, Margaret added. The fact that they're accelerating their timeline suggests they're ready to move to the final phase. Which is what concerns me most, I said quietly. What exactly is their end game? James's expression darkened. Based on the pattern, I don't think they're planning on you returning from this cruise. The answer came sooner than expected. Upon returning home, I found Elena in our bedroom, packing elegant resort wear for our cruise. I've cleared your calendar for 3 weeks, she said, smiling brilliantly. No phones, no emails, no business. Just Mediterranean sunshine and relaxation. Her enthusiasm seemed genuine, which made it all the more chilling. I noticed she was packing primarily black clothing for herself, appropriate for mourning. "Sounds like paradise," I replied, wondering if she planned for me to return at all. "You deserve it after everything you've built," she said, kissing me lightly. "It's time to enjoy the fruits of your labor." As she returned to her packing, I caught her studying my reflection in the mirror, calculating something behind her smile. The woman I'd trusted with everything was measuring me for a coffin. The Mediterranean sparkled beneath our yacht, a 120-foot luxury vessel I'd purchased years ago but rarely used. Elena had insisted on minimal crew, just Captain Parker and 2 staff members. The isolation made the open water feel vast and unforgiving. For 3 days, I played the role of distracted husband, occasionally forgetting names or fumbling with the wine opener. Elena's patience appeared saintly to the crew, but I caught the flash of satisfaction in her eyes with each episode. Captain Parker, a former naval officer with a weathered face and observant eyes, watched our interactions with subtle concern. During a moment alone on the bridge, he approached me carefully. "Mr. Harrington, everything all right with you and the missus?" His voice was low, professional, but tinged with genuine concern. "Why do you ask, Captain?" 20 years at sea teaches you to read people. Something doesn't feel right." He hesitated. "Mrs. Harrington asked about emergency protocols this morning, specifically about man overboard procedures and how long someone could survive in these waters." I nodded slightly. "Just my wife, being thorough, Captain, but I appreciate your attention to detail." "Of course, sir." He turned back to the instruments, then added, "These waters can be unpredictable. Best to stay vigilant." His warning confirmed my suspicions. Elena was making her final preparations. On the 4th night, Elena retired early, claiming a headache. I waited 30 minutes before slipping into her private suite, the separate bedrooms, her idea, ostensibly to accommodate my restless sleep. The hidden camera James had installed in her bathroom vent provided the perfect cover to search while she showered. Her tablet required a fingerprint, but I had prepared for this. The security firm I built specialized in biometric workarounds. The silicon fingerprint replica worked perfectly. What I found stopped my breath. Text messages with Michael, explicit in both their romantic content and their plans for my company. Boards prepared for the transition. Once he's declared incompetent or dead, the temporary leadership provision kicks in. With your medical POA, you'll have total control. Her reply, "Everything set for tomorrow night. Coordinates programmed." Coast Guard will search the wrong area until it's too late. Another exchange detailed their plans for after my accident. "How long before we can be public?" Michael had asked. 6 months of appropriate grieving, then a friendship that blossomed during shared loss. So tiresome, but necessary for appearances. I photographed everything with a specialized device, then returned to my cabin, my mind racing but focused. Years of military training had taught me to compartmentalize emotional reactions. I would need that discipline tonight. At dinner, I pretended to take my medication, but palmed the pills. Elena was more attentive than usual, repeatedly refilling my wineglass while barely touching hers. The dining salon, with its panoramic windows, revealing the moonlit sea, felt suddenly claustrophobic. "Remember our first anniversary?" I asked, watching her carefully. "That little restaurant in Positano?" "Of course, darling. The seafood was divine." She smiled warmly. "The owner was so charming. What was his name? Antonio?" We had never been to Positano. Our first anniversary was spent in Kyoto. The lie confirmed my suspicions. After dinner, I suggested a nightcap on the upper deck. The night air was cool, the sky brilliant with stars. We stood at the railing, the water dark below us. 20 meters down, unforgiving if one fell. "Elena," I said quietly, "I've been thinking about the company's future." "That's what retirement is for, darling. Thinking about the future while enjoying the present." She moved closer, resting her head on my shoulder. The gesture that once brought comfort now felt predatory. "I found something interesting yesterday, offshore accounts I don't remember creating." Her body tensed slightly before relaxing. "You set those up last year, Richard, for tax purposes." "That's strange, because the biometric access only has your prints." "The banker suggested that arrangement for simplicity's sake." "You agreed it made sense, since I handle most of our personal finances anyway." Her explanation came smoothly, practiced. "I also found communications between you and Michael. Rather intimate communications." The pretense dropped completely. Elena's face hardened, beauty transforming into something predatory. She stepped back, creating distance between us. "How long have you known?" "Long enough," I replied. "The medication tampering was clever. The gaslighting about my memory. The careful isolation from allies." She laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "You built the company, Richard. I built our social life, our reputation. I've spent 12 years as the supportive wife of a man nearly 20 years my senior. I deserve half, at least." "And Michael?" "Insurance. Someone young enough to enjoy the money with me." She moved closer again, champagne glass in hand. "Did you really think a woman like me would be content just waiting for you to die naturally? At your age, with your family history, it could be another 15 years. So, tomorrow night? A tragic accident. You've been unsteady lately. Too much wine. A slippery deck." She shrugged elegantly. "These things happen." "You've underestimated me, Elena." "No, Richard. You've overestimated yourself. You're 70, not the military intelligence officer you once were. Just an old man who couldn't satisfy his wife in any way that matters." The cruelty was calculated, designed to provoke an emotional response that might work to her advantage. I remained calm, which visibly unsettled her. In one swift motion, she threw her champagne in my face, momentarily blinding me. I felt her hands against my chest, shoving hard toward the railing. I caught myself, but she was stronger than she appeared. We struggled briefly before she landed a surprisingly skilled blow to my solar plexus. I recognized the technique, Michael's Brazilian jiu-jitsu training that Elena had suddenly taken interest in last year. "You forgot who built the security protocols," I gasped as I felt myself losing balance. "And you forgot that the young always outlast the old," she replied coldly, delivering a final push. The fall seemed to last forever. The cold water shocked my system as I plunged beneath the surface. From underwater, I watched the yacht's lights grow distant, heard the faint sound of Elena's voice on the radio, reporting a man overboard in the wrong coordinates. "Emergency, emergency. My husband has fallen overboard. We are at coordinates 41.7 DGAN, 12.3 DGE. A location nearly 20 nautical miles from our actual position. Military survival training took over. Conservation of energy. Controlled breathing." The emergency beacon in my waterproof watch activated silently, sending my actual coordinates to James. Now I just had to survive until help arrived. As I floated in the vast Mediterranean darkness, one thought sustained me. Elena believed she had won. That misplaced confidence would be her undoing. The cold numbed my limbs as hours passed. Dawn approached, transforming the black void around me to deep blue. In the distance, I spotted a small fishing boat. My emergency light, designed to activate in water, had worked. I had survived the first phase of Elena's plan. Now came the more complex challenge, reclaiming my life while letting her believe she'd succeeded in ending it. Paolo's fishing boat was small and weathered, much like Paolo himself. The old Italian had spotted my emergency light just before dawn, pulling me aboard with surprising strength for his age. "Not good swimming time, signore," he said simply, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. I was exhausted but alive, my survival training having kept me afloat through the long night. Paolo asked no questions as he navigated toward a small coastal village, offering only strong coffee and simple wisdom. "Beautiful things sometimes hide the most dangerous poisons," he said, gesturing toward the elegant yacht, now visible only as a distant speck. My wife, she was plain, but her heart was true. Better this way, I think. The simplicity of his assessment was oddly comforting after months of elaborate deception. At his modest home, I activated the secure communication device James had prepared. Within hours, he confirmed that Ghost Protocol was operational. "Elena reported your accident. Search and rescue is looking 20 miles from your actual location, exactly where she directed them. They've already called it a recovery operation rather than rescue." James's voice was tight with controlled anger. "She's playing the grieving widow perfectly." "And Michael?" "Arrived in Monaco this morning. They're being careful, maintaining distance publicly, but our surveillance picked up a brief meeting at the hotel bar. She's already accessed the emergency succession protocols." "What about the board?" "Emergency meeting scheduled for next week. Elena's moving faster than we anticipated. The temporary leadership clause has been activated based on your death, and she's pushing for permanent appointment before the next shareholders' meeting." I watched a news report on Paolo's small television. Elena stood on the yacht's deck, appropriately devastated in designer black, tearfully recounting how I'd been confused lately and unsteady before my tragic accident. "He insisted on fresh air after dinner," she told reporters, her voice breaking on cue. "I should have gone with him, but he wanted a moment alone. When I heard the splash—" She covered her face, unable to continue. "The performance would win her an Oscar," I noted dryly. "What now?" James asked. "We let her believe she's won while we prepare the evidence packages. I want everything documented: the medication tampering, the unauthorized system access, the offshore accounts, the falsified medical reports." "Already in progress. Thomas has a financial forensics team tracking every transaction." "Good. And Margaret?" "Maintaining her position while documenting everything. Elena trusts her because she's just an old secretary." The contempt in James's voice was evident. "Their mistake is underestimating experience," I said. "Let's use that." 2 days later, I arrived at James's secure facility, clean-shaven and rested. Multiple screens displayed Elena's movements and company activities. Margaret had provided real-time updates on the internal changes already underway. "She's moving quickly," Thomas noted, pointing to documentation. Foundation funding already diverted, key personnel reassignments, new board members being approached. "The pattern is consistent with her previous identities," James added. "Elizabeth Parker in Chicago and Elaine Keller in Boston, both married wealthy older men. Parker died in a hiking accident. Keller suffered a stroke after medication confusion. The difference is that neither had my resources or training," I said. "When is the board meeting scheduled?" "Next Friday, exactly 1 week after your accident. A memorial service is planned for Thursday." I studied the calendar, a plan forming. Perfect. She's creating her own stage for our reunion. We spent the next 3 days assembling evidence packages for the board, SEC investigators, and law enforcement. Margaret provided crucial internal documentation while maintaining her facade of cooperation with Elena. "She's dissolving your mentorship foundation immediately after gaining control," Margaret reported. Called it an unnecessary drain on resources in a planning memo to Michael. That detail hardened my resolve. This stopped being just about me the moment she targeted their futures. The 50 young people in our mentorship program, bright minds from disadvantaged backgrounds, represented my true legacy. Elena's willingness to discard them revealed the depth of her greed. One of our foundation graduates, Jaden Rodriguez, had been instrumental in developing our cybersecurity protocols. I asked Margaret to bring him into our confidence. "Can he be trusted?" Thomas asked. "Absolutely," I replied. "I sponsored his education personally after his father was killed in Afghanistan. He understands loyalty." Jaden arrived that evening, shock evident on his face when he saw me. "Mr. Harrington, they said you were—" "Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," I replied with a smile. "And orchestrated by my wife." After explaining the situation, I asked for his help securing the Foundation's digital assets and establishing a parallel governance structure that Elena couldn't dismantle. "Consider it done," he said without hesitation. "The Foundation saved my life. I won't let her destroy it." Thomas coordinated with selected law enforcement contacts, people whose integrity we could trust. The evidence was damning: financial fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. "We have enough for criminal charges," he confirmed, "but the corporate governance issues require the board's cooperation." "They'll cooperate when they see the complete picture," I assured him. Elena's mistake was believing that removing me would be enough. She never understood that I built redundancies into everything, especially trust. As we finalized preparations, news coverage showed Elena playing her role flawlessly. The grieving widow attending meetings with Richard's wishes in mind, the brave executive stepping up during tragedy. "She's convincing," James admitted grudgingly. "She's had practice," I replied, "but this performance will be her last." Elena stood in SecureTech's atrium, elegantly draped in black, receiving condolences at my memorial service. Michael maintained appropriate distance while providing company leadership in this difficult time. The headquarters building, my vision brought to life in steel and glass, now hosted an elaborate charade. James observed from an inconspicuous position, recording interactions and conversations. Margaret circulated with practiced efficiency, noting which board members appeared genuinely grieved and which were already positioning themselves in the new regime. "Richard would want us to be strong," Elena told the assembled crowd, her voice breaking perfectly. "His vision for SecureTech will continue to guide us, even as we adapt to changing markets." She touched the large portrait of me displayed prominently near the entrance, a staged gesture for maximum emotional impact. Michael followed with his own tribute. "Richard built an extraordinary foundation. Now it's our responsibility to build upon that legacy with forward-thinking leadership." The subtext was clear to those who understood the dynamics. The old way was dead, literally and figuratively. Bernard Wilson, my oldest friend on the board, approached the podium with visible emotion. Richard valued integrity above all else. Any decisions made in his absence should reflect that core principle. Elena's subtle frown revealed her frustration with this reminder. After the service, Elena announced an immediate restructuring of the Mentorship Foundation, citing financial responsibility during leadership transition. "While we all admired Richard's philanthropic spirit," she explained to the board members present, "we must acknowledge that the foundation represents a significant financial commitment that may not align with our core business objectives. Several foundation students present exchanged alarmed glances. Jaden Rodriguez, a brilliant programmer I'd personally recruited from an underserved Miami high school, approached Elena directly. "Mrs. Harrington, the foundation is essential to Secure Tech's talent pipeline. Mr. Harrington always said it was his proudest achievement." "And we honor that sentiment," Elena replied smoothly. "But sentiment doesn't drive shareholder value. We'll explore more cost-effective community engagement options." James captured the exchange, sending a secure message. Final evidence secured. Green light. Later that evening, Elena entered my home office, attempting to access the hidden safe room containing backup servers and personal documents. The biometric scanner rejected her handprint. "System access denied," announced my pre-recorded voice. "Unauthorized user detected." Elena's composure slipped. "Override security protocol Alpha 7, she commanded, using the code she'd heard me use before. "Invalid authorization," the system responded. "Security containment initiated." Metal shields descended over the windows and doors, a protection measure designed for external threats. The room was now effectively sealed. She immediately called Michael. "The system's locked me out. Get over here now." When Michael arrived 30 minutes later, their frustration had escalated to panic. "Try your override again," Elena demanded. "It won't work," Michael replied, sweating visibly. "These security protocols were designed by Richard himself." "They're responding as if there's an intrusion." "We are the intrusion," Elena snapped. "He must have had contingencies we didn't know about." "That's impossible. We had access to everything." Michael's confidence was crumbling. Unless what? Unless he suspected something before the yacht. But that's impossible. He showed no signs. "He's dead, Michael. Dead men don't implement security protocols." "Unless he isn't dead," Michael whispered, voicing the fear that had begun to form. Elena's phone rang. An SEC investigator requesting her presence at tomorrow's board meeting. "Routine questions about recent transactions," the investigator assured her. After the call, Elena's careful facade cracked completely. "They're looking at the offshore transfers. How could they find those so quickly?" "The system must have triggered automated alerts," Michael realized. "Richard built in more safeguards than we thought." "Fix this," Elena hissed. "I didn't come this far to lose everything now." Meanwhile, in our secure location, final preparations were underway. Evidence packages were prepared for each board member, law enforcement had been strategically positioned, and SEC investigators were primed with key financial documentation. "Everything's in place," Thomas confirmed. "Elena and Michael will arrive separately, maintaining their professional distance. The board will be assembled by 9 a.m. I straightened my tie, examining my reflection. The past week had been challenging, but I appeared composed, dignified, hardly the confused old man Elena had portrayed. "Remember," James cautioned, "she's dangerous when cornered." "So am I replied simply. "Let's finish this." The Secure Tech boardroom hummed with tense conversation. Elena sat at the head of the table, my seat, projecting confidence despite the unexpected SEC presence. Michael stood nearby, presenting financial projections that emphasized the necessary restructuring of company priorities. The boardroom, with its sweeping views of Silicon Valley, had hosted countless strategic decisions over 20 years. Today would be its most dramatic. "As you can see," Michael concluded his presentation, "eliminating certain legacy costs will improve our quarterly performance by 17%. These legacy costs include the mentorship foundation that has provided SecureTech with some of our most innovative talent, Bernard Wilson pointed out, his voice carrying the weight of his 4 decades in technology, many of whom are now key to our core security products. Sentimentality is a luxury public companies cannot afford, Elena replied smoothly. Richard understood this toward the end, which is why he appointed me as his successor. I don't recall that vote, Bernard countered. It was part of our personal arrangement, Elena said dismissively. Now, shall we proceed with the formal transition approval? The SEC investigator, a methodical woman named Rivera, cleared her throat. Before that vote, I have some questions about recent financial transfers to Cayman accounts established in February. Elena's smile remained fixed, but her knuckles whitened around her pen. Standard tax planning. Our CFO can provide complete documentation. Michael nodded too quickly. Of course, though those particular accounts were established at Richard's request. Just as the vote was called, security alerts sounded throughout the building. Screens displayed protocol violation warnings across the network. The integrated security system, My Design, had detected unauthorized protocol changes. The security chief entered, his expression professional but strained. We have an unauthorized access situation. Elena's composure flickered. Handle it and report back after our meeting. I'm afraid the access is to this room, ma'am. What do you mean? We're all authorized. The boardroom doors opened, and I stepped through, accompanied by James and 2 FBI agents. The room froze in collective shock. I believe you're in my seat, Elena, I said calmly. Elena's face drained of color, her body physically recoiling as though seeing a ghost. Michael dropped his presentation remote, stumbling backward until he hit the wall. Richard? Bernard whispered in disbelief. Very much alive, despite recent efforts to the contrary. I nodded to the security team, who distributed sealed evidence packets to each board member. Please review these materials carefully. They document a systematic conspiracy of fraud, corporate espionage, and attempted murder. The SEC investigator's eyes widened as she skimmed the contents of her packet. She immediately signaled to her colleagues waiting outside. This is impossible, Elena stammered, recovering quickly. This man is clearly an imposter. Richard drowned last week. The Coast Guard confirmed. The Coast Guard searched where you directed them, 20 miles from where you actually pushed me overboard. I activated the boardroom display, showing the yacht's GPS coordinates compared with the search area. An unfortunate navigational error on your part. Michael edged toward the door, but found it blocked by FBI agents. This is absurd, Elena declared, her voice steady, but eyes frantic. Richard has a twin brother, estranged for years. This is clearly Thomas trying to claim. Fingerprints and DNA would disprove that rather quickly, I interrupted. But more convincingly. I played the recording from the yacht, Elena's cold voice filling the room. Did you really think a woman like me would be content just waiting for you to die naturally? At your age, with your family history, it could be another 15 years. As her own words echoed through the boardroom, Elena's composure completely collapsed. She lunged for the exit, but was intercepted by security. Michael, seeing the situation collapse, immediately began distancing himself. She orchestrated everything, he blurted, panic evident in his voice. The medication tampering, the offshore accounts, it was all Elena's plan. I was just following orders. Your text messages suggest enthusiastic participation, Mr. Reynolds, noted the FBI agent, along with a rather intimate relationship. Can't wait until we can drop the pretense and enjoy the billions together. Doesn't sound like reluctant involvement. Bernard stood, His face flushed with anger. "You've been systematically dismantling Richard's company from the inside. The foundation cuts, the security protocol changes. It was all preparation." "You don't understand," Elena said, switching tactics to appear vulnerable. "Richard was becoming unstable. His cognitive decline was putting the company at risk. Everything I did was to protect SecureTech's future. Dr. Harrison's report indicates Richard's cognitive function is completely normal for his age," the SEC investigator countered, referencing the medical documentation. "And your consultation with Dr. Lansing occurred without Richard ever being examined." The next hour unfolded with clinical precision. SEC investigators presented documentation of financial irregularities. Medical experts confirmed the medication tampering. Technical specialists verified the unauthorized system access. Through it all, I maintained my composure, focusing on corporate protection rather than personal vengeance. When asked if I wanted to press additional charges beyond the corporate fraud, I declined. "The company's security and our foundation's continuation are my primary concerns," I stated. "Justice will be served through proper legal channels." Elena, seeing her options evaporate, made one final desperate accusation. "You're too old to run this company anyway. The board knows it. Everyone knows it." I regarded her calmly. "Old enough to have planned for someone like you decades ago." As Elena and Michael were escorted out in handcuffs, the board unanimously reinstated my authority. The emergency meeting transformed into a strategic session to address the damage and strengthen governance protocols. "We should have seen the signs," Bernard admitted, shaking his head. She was very convincing. "Deception usually is," I replied. "Which is why we're implementing new oversight procedures effective immediately." I outlined changes to our governance structure. Dual verification requirements for major financial transactions, expanded board oversight of succession planning, and enhanced protection for the foundation's endowment. "These measures aren't about distrust," I explained. "They're about creating systems stronger than any individual, including me." As the meeting concluded, I remained briefly alone in the boardroom, looking at the portrait Elena had so quickly installed. My own face stared back at me, idealized, sanitized, and conveniently historical. I had it removed that afternoon. The past belonged in the past. The future required vigilance. 1 month after the boardroom confrontation, I stood before the assembled Mentorship Foundation students. Their faces reflected relief and renewed confidence now that the program's future was secure. The foundation headquarters, housed in a renovated warehouse in East Palo Alto, buzzed with energy. Computer labs and collaboration spaces represented opportunity rather than charity, a critical distinction in my philosophy. "Your futures were never in doubt," I assured them. "In fact, we're expanding the program by 50% next year." The announcement prompted spontaneous applause. What had nearly been dismantled was now strengthened with enhanced governance protections and dedicated funding. "We're establishing new scholarships named for the employees who protected SecureTech's mission during the recent challenges," I continued. "The Margaret Wilson Excellence Award will provide full university funding for 5 additional students annually." Margaret, recently promoted to Chief of Staff, smiled modestly as applause filled the room. Her quiet competence had been instrumental in preserving everything I'd built. The James Conner Security Fellowship will support students interested in cybersecurity careers, and the Loyalty Scholarship, awarded to students who demonstrate exceptional integrity, will cover graduate education costs. Jaden Rodriguez, now graduated and joining our security development team, approached afterward. "We were worried when we heard about the restructuring. No one believed you would have wanted that. Which is why trust must be built on more than one person's authority, I explained, guiding him toward a display of the new governance structure. The new framework ensures the foundation continues regardless of who leads the company. Like building security into the system architecture instead of adding it later, he nodded, understanding immediately. Precisely. The strongest security isn't reactive. It's designed in from the beginning. The changes extended beyond the foundation. SecureTech had implemented enhanced oversight protocols throughout the organization. Trust is valuable, I told the board, but verification is essential. We established a formal mentorship pipeline, pairing seasoned executives with promising young talent. The program included regular rotation of responsibilities to prevent information silos that could enable future manipulation. That evening, I returned to my home for the first time since Elena's arrest. James had supervised the removal of her possessions and a complete security overhaul. Strange how empty 60 rooms can feel, I remarked, walking through the silent house. You could sell it, James suggested. Too many memories. Some memories are worth keeping, even the painful ones. They remind us to stay vigilant. I paused at the photograph of Elena and me on our wedding day. Her smile, once captivating, now appeared calculating. I removed the photo, but didn't discard it, a reminder of how easily trust could be weaponized. The following weekend, my sister Catherine visited. Elena had systematically alienated us, fabricating conflicts and misunderstandings to isolate me from family. I should have seen through her, Catherine said, genuine remorse in her voice. She was so convincing about your memory issues, your growing irritability. She showed me doctors' reports. Forgeries, I assured her. She manipulated everyone, Catherine. That was her particular talent. At 73, Catherine's sharp mind remained undiminished, though arthritis had slowed her movements. As a former judge, she recognized the legal implications immediately. Her previous marriages, those deaths weren't accidents, were they? The authorities are reopening both cases, I confirmed. The pattern is too consistent to ignore. Thomas joined us, our public reconciliation now genuine. The financial forensics team traced her pattern back 15 years, he reported. 2 previous husbands, multiple identities. She was more thorough than most operatives I've tracked. How can you ever trust anyone again after something like this? Catherine asked softly. I considered the question carefully. Trust isn't blind faith. It's earned through actions, verified through time. Elena taught me that trust without verification is vulnerability. That should be engraved somewhere, Thomas commented. Preferably on the boardroom wall. The aftermath brought unexpected silver linings. Family connections renewed, security protocols strengthened, and a clearer perspective on what truly mattered. At SecureTech, I implemented a phased leadership transition plan. Unlike Elena's abrupt takeover attempt, this would be methodical, transparent, and built on earned trust. We're creating a structure that embodies our core values, I explained to the executive team. Security isn't just our product, it's our practice. I established an innovation council comprising our most promising talent, including several foundation graduates now in senior positions. Their perspective balanced the experience of longer-serving executives, creating a dynamic that prevented stagnation. Margaret had identified promising leadership candidates from within. The next generation shouldn't have to wait until we're gone to have influence, I told her. Better to mentor them while we can still share what we've learned. During a mentoring session with this next generation, an ambitious young executive asked about my remarkable calm throughout the ordeal. How did you not seek revenge? I would have wanted to destroy anyone who betrayed me like that. I smiled, recognizing the fire of youth that prioritizes emotion over strategy. When you've built something to last, you can weather any storm. Revenge is about the past. Leadership is about the future. The criminal trials proceeded with methodical precision. Elena received 20 years for attempted murder and financial fraud. Michael, who cooperated extensively, received 7 years for his role in the conspiracy. I attended neither sentencing, having said everything necessary in my deposition. Their punishment was justice, not satisfaction. 6 months after Elena's conviction, I took my new yacht out on the Mediterranean. The same waters that had nearly claimed my life now brought peaceful reflection. Captain Parker, who had noted Elena's suspicious questions before my accident, had been rehired. His weathered face broke into a rare smile when I boarded. "Good to see you back on the water, Mr. Harrington. Some people might avoid it after what happened." "Avoiding fear only gives it power, Captain. Better to face it directly." As the sun set over the Mediterranean, I considered the strange journey that had brought me here. Elena had been right about one thing. At 70, I wasn't the same man I had been in my military days. I was wiser, more patient, and far more dangerous when threatened. They say Mediterranean waters hold memories. These waves once felt like enemies as I struggled to survive Elena's betrayal. Now they rock gently beneath my boat, partners in quiet contemplation. The painful lesson they taught me has become wisdom worth sharing. Experience isn't merely about accumulating years, it's about developing the patience to respond rather than react. At 70, I possessed something Elena and Michael never understood: the perspective to see beyond immediate victory to long-term consequences. Youth values speed, age values thoroughness. When Elena pushed me into these waters, she thought she was eliminating an obstacle. Instead, she created an adversary with nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. The dignity we maintain when challenged reveals more about our character than any success. Throughout Elena's manipulation, I refused to descend to vengeful tactics or public accusations. Boundaries aren't just about keeping others out, they're about defining what we stand for. Sometimes, respect must be demanded through action when it isn't freely given. The board members who witnessed Elena's downfall learned more about leadership from how I handled betrayal than from any success we'd shared. My true legacy was never the $3 billion Elena coveted. It lives in the 50 young minds our foundation nurtures each year, in the ethical principles that guide secure tech, and in the governance structures that will outlast any individual. What we build matters far less than who we help build themselves. The technology we create will be obsolete in a decade. The lives we change will extend for generations. If you've weathered family betrayal or professional deception, trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Age brings not weakness, but a different kind of strength: the wisdom to verify what we're told, the patience to plan our response, and the perspective to focus on what truly matters. Share your hard-earned wisdom with those who will value it, but never forget to protect what you've built. Security isn't paranoia. It's prudence in a world where not everyone shares your values. The Mediterranean sunset reminds me that endings often bring the most beautiful light. Whatever storms you've weathered, remember, sometimes the quietest response speaks the loudest truth. Elena's dramatic betrayal ended with the simple click of handcuffs. My supposed weakness became my greatest strength. In the end, it wasn't youth or beauty or even cunning that prevailed, but the steady hand of experience guiding justice to its natural conclusion.